Welcome back to Rust Hoarder Garage and the 1971. What are we doing? 6-liter T56 swap. That's right. Yeah. So this car, the more I touch it, the more I find that's just broken or gonna need replacing for some reason. It's a good car to build because it's rock solid underneath, which is the most important thing, but everything I look at is broken. Latest casualty, the gas pedal's even broken. The plastic mount that goes on the firewall just disintegrated. I don't know if that's available aftermarket or I'm going to be looking for one. But yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be looking for a parts car for this thing. All right, so now that the front end is stripped, cleaned, well, not really cleaned, but I scraped some of the grease off of the front crossmember. This thing was really disgusting. Whatever engine and transmission was in this leaked bad. So I just did a quick scrape off with a razor blade and a little bit of brake clean just to get it reasonable so we can work with it and not be totally greasy while we're trying to figure out what's going on here. And so we're going to start mocking things up. Now, I'm not going to use the real engine transmission yet because I'm putting a 6-liter in that I'm going to cam. So, and a bunch of other things. So I have some things I need to do to that engine before it goes in. So as far as mock-up goes, I'm going to use the Mule 5.3. If you've seen my other videos, that's the 5.3 that had a low oil pressure issue. We ran it with a carburetor intake and a factory PCM, and we ran it with fuel injection and an eBay harness. And turned out that engine has a walked cam bearing, so it's a good engine to use for mock-up, because I don't know if I'll ever fix it or not. And since we've already had the oil pan off, no big deal swapping oil pans, because we're going to try multiple oil pans and multiple headers. If you haven't seen my introduction to this thing already, we're going to try all different stuff to see what fits when you put an LS family engine in a Nova. And also, even though I am putting a 6-speed in this, and it absolutely will be going in, I'm not using the 6-speed yet for the mock-up. I'm going to use a Turbo 350 empty case. And the whole reason behind that, again, if you haven't seen an introduction to this thing, I'd like to learn for myself and for the person who has one of these cars with a factory Turbo 350 in it. Can they just drop an LS in here and will it fit? So I'm going to use an empty Turbo 350 case bolted to the factory Turbo 350 crossmember in the factory location. So the transmission is going to be the locator. Then the engine, wherever it sits, that's where it would sit if you owned a Nova and wanted to pull your 350 out or your 6-banger and put in an LS family engine. And then I want to see 4 sets of headers. I have long tubes, 4 sets of long tubes. And then I have some others we could look at as well. I think I have some shorts around here as well as cast iron aftermarkets. I've got a ton of stuff here we could try just to see what fits what. And that goes for exhaust, for all the headers and such, and it goes for oil pans. I have 4 different oil pans to try out on this and see what fits. And we're going to go over all that. But the first thing we're going to go over is motor mounts, all the factory options. Because as I said before, I'm not using an aftermarket kit to install this setup. You can spend well over $1,000. I was just looking today. Some of these kits are $1,300, $1,400, and some are around $1,100. I don't know what's difference between them, but that's a lot of money for a set of engine mounts, an oil pan, and some headers that aren't even coated. It's a lot of money. So we're going to try to do it much, much cheaper with eBay parts or Amazon parts, wherever you get your stuff. And we're going to see how reasonable we can do this and what low buck parts will work and work right. First thing we're going to do is get the transmission crossmember installed, because that's going to be the locator for everything. All right, with the car in the air, first thing I'm going to do is install the transmission crossmember, because this is going to be the locator for everything. This is your run-of-the-mill small block or 6-cylinder transmission crossmember. This is good for Power Glide, Turbo 350, Muncie, not Turbo 400, and not big block. If it was a big block crossmember, the holes would be offset quite a bit, and there'd be an extra notch in this thing. And that would be for Muncie only. If you had a Turbo 400, you had a crossmember that was offset but was tubular, like a Camaro. So that's not what we have here. We're just going right now with this. And if we do end up using big block offset mounts, it's not going to matter in the end, because I'm going to have to make my own crossmember, or modify one rather, for the 6-speed anyway. But right now, we're just looking at engine location in the stock position with the Turbo 350. So we'll get this bolted up and go from there. And since the crossmember was out of the car, I have no hardware, so I got to grab some bolts. But you'll see on the crossmember here, you have the round hole and the oval hole. This is the rear hole for the crossmember, and you can see the witness marks in there where it was bolted in. Because whatever was in this, was the crossmember that was in it. So we'll slide it up in there, put some bolts in, and go. All right, we'll get this installed. And based on looking at a factory subframe that I have outside, the way the crossmember is installed, you see there's a big hole here. That was on the driver's side. And there's holes stamped in the steel here. One in the front, and there'd be 2 in the rear. So these are going to do toward the back of the car. So these are kind of a pain to get in. Let's see. Got to get it just the right way. Figure out how this went. There it goes. All right. That's going to sit there like that. Get some bolts. Get it bolted in. All right, we are just about to the point of flying the engine and transmission in for mock-up. Before we do, I just want to put up a quick, well, it's quick, but a quick video section that I did regarding the engine mounts that came in Novas, the 3 different styles for the V8, because 6-cylinder and 4-cylinder were their own. But just the V8 stuff to try to keep it focused, and just Nova to try to keep it focused on just Nova, because I could talk about this for all different GM stuff, but just Nova. So let me roll these videos, and after that's done, hopefully you understand the differences between all these mounts and why I'm going to use what I'm going to use. Before I get into that, I wanted to talk about Nova engine mounts, specifically the different frame stands and the engine mounts themselves. So, now that these cars are, how old? 50 plus years old. A lot of things, I don't know what you say, tribal knowledge or knowledge from the past is gone. And what that causes is a lot of problems. One of the biggest problems I see, and has been going on for many years, is people put a big block in a Nova, or they're swapping in engines and they have problems. The engines just don't fit. Well, to make it even worse, the aftermarket has consolidated a lot of parts, saying that this part fits all small blocks and all big blocks, and it's not how it works. So let's start off with what the factory put in these cars, what mounts went with what, and why you may run into problems with the aftermarket. And hopefully this information will help you avoid having problems, because when you mix and match things or use things that are supposed to fit everything, it's not how it works. So even though we're not putting a small block or a big block in this Nova, this information is still relative, because a lot of people use adapter plates to put their LS in, and I'm gonna try these. These are cheap Amazon, like $20-something plates. Some people like the, what are they, dingo sliders or something, and That may work. If these don't work, I'll probably do something like that, because then you have infinite adjustability, right? But the thing is, when you're using this plate, that means you're going to use the GM engine mount that bolts to that and bolts to the engine. So in order for this all to work, it still has to fit. Now, the thing is, we'll go to big block last, because it might actually come into play. But right now, look at it like this. And the reason I'm telling you this, I'm not talking to hear myself talk. These cars are 50 plus years old. You don't know what you're going to find when you buy one of these cars. It could be original, it could be not original. You could have a 6-cylinder car and you want to convert it to LS, or you could have a V8 car and you want to convert it to LS. But there are some things to look for, because when it came to engine mounts, there are two different, for the small block, there are two different, completely different size frame stands. And on frame stands, I'm talking about the part that bolts to the subframe that the mount will go to. Completely different. And they each have their own completely different engine mount that bolts to the engine. When you try to mix and match things, it doesn't work. When you put things correct, it works. So, as an example, I just took this out of the car. These are low performance, call it 307 engine stands. They are, let's get a measurement, 2.5, call it 2.5 inches wide on this perch, about 2.5 inches wide. And if I sit it on the table, the distance from the table to the center of the hole is about 2.25 inches. So from the center of that hole down to the bottom where it would mount is about 2.25 inches, okay? That's a 307 frame stand. Then I have this pair of these, and these are reproduction, but they're the right dimensions, look correct. These are for 350s. These are what we call high performance, and I'll explain and you'll see the difference. These are not 2.5 inches wide. These are 2 3/8 inches wide. And from the table to the center of that hole is 1.5 inches. So 307, 350. 307 is much wider and taller. So stay with me here, because a lot of this information has changed over the years or gotten lost because of the aftermarket, for sure. So say you had a 307 engine in your Nova, and this tall, wide frame stand is what you had in there. If you went to Napa and bought an engine mount, this is what they gave you, okay? This fits right over the 307 frame stand perfectly. The hole lines up perfectly. But notice this mount. It's pretty much just a piece of rubber bonded to a flat piece of steel. If this were to break, there's nothing keeping it from flying apart. And what would happen is the engine would rock over if this was on your driver's side and put your fan through the shroud. They had no safety. If you have a 350 in your car with the narrower lower mount frame stand, this is the mount they would sell you. Fits right over perfectly. Hole lines up perfectly. Notice how much beefier this mount is. This thing is riveted steel through the rubber into the steel in the back. And it has this piece here, which is a safety. If for some reason this mount broke, this retainer here would keep the whole thing from flying apart and putting your fan through the shroud and letting everything go all over the place. So you have two completely different styles of engine mounts and completely different size frame stands. So you've got two completely different designs of engine mount and stand. But the small block is a small block. Nothing changed on the engine. When you have these assembled together with the correct mount on the correct stand, they're the same height. overall, the engine would be in the same location. There is no difference. So it's not like the taller frame stand set the engine higher or anything like that. The small block is in the same position no matter what, but you have to have the correct engine stand and mount assembly. Now, things that have messed things up is if you look on the aftermarket, I've seen it. I just looked. If you look for an engine mount for, say, a 70 Nova to 350, they list the same part number for a 307. It's wrong. And if you try to pry these open and get them to fit over this frame stand, it's just not going to work. And this is not something that's lost over the years. This is still going on because I looked on Amazon because I was considering using polyurethane engine mounts. And I found a set of course, no-name engine mounts on Amazon for sale. And there were a ton of reviews, negative reviews, saying they didn't fit. They were too narrow, didn't fit over my frame stand. Well, what that is a whole bunch of people thinking that these are all the same and every mount is the same, and that's not the case. If you want to be sure you have the right ones, the real ones, like I think it's Prothane mounts. Who makes all the polyurethane stuff? Is it Prothane? It might be. They sell two different part numbers. One is the narrower mount and one is the wider mount. And that's because they know there are two different styles of frame stand. You want to make it even worse? If you want a solid Moroso engine mount to bolt over these, their chart's wrong. I was looking at it and they have all mixed up part numbers. So you can't even go by their part number. You have to go by dimensions. So this is what I would do, and this is what I'm going to do. First off, don't ever use this style of engine mount on any kind of high performance build. I wouldn't even use them on a low performance build because these things come apart. And they are still sold. I've seen them listed for sale in like engine conversion kits or swap kits. These things are junk. If you buy a Nova and it's a 6-cylinder car and you want to switch to a V8, just buy the 350 frame stands, the ones that are 2 3/8 inches wide on the top. And like I said, it's about 1.5 inches to the center line from the base. And then get yourself the narrower, longer 350 mounts. Remember that. If you have a long frame stand, you need a short engine mount. And if you have a short frame stand, you need a long engine mount. And you have to keep that in your mind too, because it gets confusing. But what I would do, like I said, now that polyurethane mounts are available, if you already have a 307 car and you have these 307 stands, no big deal. Just buy the wider frame, polyurethane engine mounts that will fit this. If you have a 6-cylinder, I would buy the 350 ones and get the narrow ones. But if you're using the polyurethane mounts, it really shouldn't matter. I don't think they break. I know for a fact the real ones, like the Prothane ones, that company sells two different part numbers. One part number fits the narrower mount, and one part number fits the wider mount. All right, so that's enough of that. For those who couldn't care less about that stuff, hey, sorry you had to listen to it. But, you know, these cars have gone through a lot over 50 years. You never know what's under the hood. I mean, and if you're looking around a swap meet and you see these things laying around, they're not all the same. Keep that in mind. You want to make things even more confusing? Here's a set of 67, 68 Camaro big block frame stands. They're not narrow, they're the wider style, and they're a completely different height than the Nova. You would always think that the Nova and the Camaro are the same. Nope. GM was playing around with this stuff, so it's no wonder that people are constantly having problems where they say they set the engine in and things don't fit. And that's not even doing an LS. That's just putting in a big block or a small block conversion or something. Like I said, the Amazon reviews are crazy for the mounts because people don't know that they have different size frame stands, and then they bash the mounts and say they don't fit when it's really not the mount's fault. All right, so now that I've pissed off all the people who think I talk too much, I'm trying to teach you stuff, man. One other wrench to throw in the whole thing, and that's the big block mounts. I have a set of big block frame mounts here, or frame stands. What they do is they move the engine forward and over to the passenger side. So if you were not using slider mounts or something, you know, you could use those to get the engine forward, and they will also get the engine over to the passenger side. Like, say we put this in and the headers are all smashing into the steering box. If like a 1/2 inch clearance would get it, the big block mounts might do the trick, but I don't know what they would do as far as firewall clearance on the heater side. So it's just I have them there as an option because I want to learn. In the end, I guess we'll find out what works with what. But what I plan on doing is using the 350 low frame stands. I'm going to use one of these rubber mounts on the passenger side, and I'm going to use a solid mount on the driver's side. All right, so have I pissed off enough people for talking too much about engine mounts? Maybe, but you got to understand, I'm trying to do more than just a video. I'm actually trying to give out some information that isn't readily available, that's for sure. So, you saw the different style of mounts there. Obviously, you have a big problem with the engine mounts breaking because not only did it put your fan through the shroud, it could make your throttle stick open. So, what was GM's response to this? They let the dealer do, say, a recall, sorta, but what was the fix? They would strap a cable to the engine and tie the engine to the frame. So, when the engine rocked over, the cable would restrain the engine and you couldn't break the engine mount. Or if the engine mount did break, the engine didn't crank over enough to the point where you stuck the throttle wide open. Cheesy response. The real fix for it, of course, came out in 1973, and here I'm out in my boneyard, and you know what that is, right? So the real fix that came out in 1973 was the clamshell style mount. So these came on 73 Up Novas and had a large steel triangular type brace that bolted to the engine. You've seen them because they use these things all the way up until what? Late 80s, really, all the way up into the 90s. I've had them on 4th Gen Camaros, the same kind of idea, with the rubber insulator on the frame and the large steel bracket on the engine. These don't break, and that solved the issue with using the earlier style mounts. So then, why am I going to use the earlier design 1964 to 1972 mount and not just throw clamshells on? Because if you look, the conversion kits that you buy for the big money, they use a clamshell style mount. I'm not using the clamshell for a couple reasons. One, even though that clamshell mount is a universal, I'll say GM style mount, they used them on all different makes and models that they produced. The actual steel bracket that bolted to the engine, believe it or not, they are not all the same. If you take one out of a truck or a Nova or a Camaro, they may be different. I mean, depending on how the frame was made, the angles are different on those brackets. So do I have a set of guaranteed came from a Nova 73, 74 brackets around? I don't know. Yes, I've had plenty of those Novas over the years, but do I have the brackets marked? Who knows? The other reason is size. Those clamshell mounts are much bigger than the earlier 64 to 72 design. Most of the time, headers, if they were really designed to fit the chassis, were designed to fit the earlier small 60, I'll call it 68 to 72 mount in a Nova. So there's a good chance or a chance that if it fits with the smaller, earlier mount, it may not fit with the large clamshell type mounts, and you'd have to cut them and modify them. Is it a problem? Not really, you know, depending on how you modify them. I've had to do it before on custom builds, but generally, even back in the old days when header companies built the headers for the Novas, they were built, mocked up, and designed around the earlier, smaller style mount. and it may not fit with the 73, 74 mounts. And lastly, the biggest drawback to the smaller, earlier mounts was breakage. That's not an issue anymore because I always run a solid driver's side mount and a regular rubber style mount on the passenger side. That eliminates any issue or any worry of breakage. That engine's not going anywhere. You're not going to break that solid mount. I always run, I said, either a rubber or a polyurethane on the passenger side, and the transmission, just driver's side solid only. And that seems to work very well. I have no issues with anything. So those are the reasons I'm going to stick with the earlier style small mount. I got a much better chance of the headers fitting, and I got a 0 chance of breakage. So, is that enough? I think I've made people fast forward enough if they don't want to know that stuff, but let's get to wrenching. All right, finally. I have talked more than people want me to talk. Sorry. Like I said, I'm just trying to give, no matter what I do on any build, there's a reason behind everything I do. And sometimes it's a good idea to know what that reason is. So anyway, there's the Mule 5.3. I dragged it out last night. We'll move it over here without dropping it, hopefully. And this is going to be the mock-up engine. Okay, I don't know what that was. All right, transmission. Turbo 350. Well, you can't carry a transmission around like that? Can now. All right, we'll bring the car out. And let's see, put that there. Now we'll see how far out I want to get it. Have enough room to work here and get enough of an angle to show you what's going on. All right, so first thing, try to do this from this side. I'll get the transmission on the engine. Easiest, no, I'm not going to say easiest install ever because that's just going to bite me. So let's see. Because if the dowel holes are dirty, and they are, got to clean them up first. All right, let's try again. Cleaned up the dowels and the holes. That should be better. All right, pick a couple bolts. All right, hopefully that comes back off. All right, here's the plan, so you understand exactly what I'm doing here. The transmission has a factory transmission mount on it. We're going to fly the engine and transmission in and line up the transmission with the crossmember in a factory location. That means when it sets in, the distance between the back of the engine and the firewall is going to be exactly where your original 6-cylinder or 350 small block, whatever, would be. So that way we can check clearance to the firewall. As far as the engine mounts, I have no engine stands, no frame stands on the subframe right now. I'm going to be using the short, narrow 350 frame stands. Okay, these are what, 2 3/8 wide, And approximately, because you're going to see different numbers, about 1.5 inches from the bottom to the center line of the hole. Very different than the tall 307s. But they're not bolted in because there's still a little wiggle room. What I'm going to do is, when we set the engine in, I have the bolts. I'm just going to put the bolts into the frame stand and the subframe and let them sit loose. As far as the engine side, we're going to bolt on these plates to the engine. These are like $22 off Amazon because these are permanently mounted. They only go on one way. The variable is what set of holes you use to bolt up your engine mount. Then as far as engine mounts go, because I'm using the short, narrower frame stands, I'm going to be using these engine mounts that match them. Now, in the end, I'm going to be using a solid mount on the driver's side. I am all out of, I'll call them narrow, tall, solid engine mounts. I have 3 of the other style, the wider, shorter ones. But I need a longer one. Swap meets are coming up, so I'm sure I'll find one at the swap meet before I have to buy new. So, to mock this up, I'll use these, which is going to do the same thing. Everything will be in the same location. The only thing I have to check is, because these are aftermarket, if the hole is not perfect, like this side, looking at me, looks perfect. This side looks like it's off a little. I may have to open the hole up on this a little bit because this is aftermarket and, you know, that kind of stuff happens. Not a deal killer. I know this is the correct mount and I know all I gotta do is open that up and it'll work. So that is the plan. We're going to fly the engine and transmission in, set up these mounts, set the engine down, and see where it lands and make sure everything lines up. All right, so we're going to get this engine in the air. Also going to be draining the oil out of it and taking the oil pan off so that we can try many different styles of oil pan. I'm a little bit crooked here. And let me adjust my seat belt. All right, that's a little better. All right, engine is in the air. I'm going to drain the oil now and get the oil pan off now. Makes sense to fly it in without an oil pan. It'll be easier, and then it'll be a lot easier to, hopefully, while it's in the car, set different oil pans up on the engine and get an idea of clearances. I'm pretty sure there's still oil in this engine. I mean, we ran it. Oh, you know what, though? We took it apart and to find that cam bearing walked, so there may not be oil in it. Yeah, there's no oil in this. Well, some that has drained back, but not much, I don't think. It's still coming out, but it's not 5 quarts, that's for sure. All right, let's get this oil pan off. I already cracked everything loose, so they should come right out. All right, I think we're down to the last one. I think. Oh yeah, it's the last one. Alrighty. Like I said, we had this oil pan off multiple times before when doing the checks for the oil pressure issues. Alright, get this pickup tube out of here. That we had out to put the brand new O-ring in. That was not the fix, unfortunately. This one's got a walked cam bearing. where's the oil going to come out? Here? Let's see. Pretty good. All right, my new O-ring is still like new. Okay, finally time to assemble. So I have my eBay not eBay. These are from Amazon. I'm sure they're the same on eBay. And here's a hardware kit. When I can, I'll try to go through my history and take a picture of like what I bought, because links don't last. They die. Things move around and whatever. But, you know, there's so many different sellers selling these things. I'm sure you can find these on Amazon or whatever. Pretty simple. They're even marked driver and passenger, so you know which one goes where. They're only going on one way. You're not going to go on. Well, I guess you could put them on upside down, but then the letter would be upside down, so I don't think we're going to do that. I know every time I think I find something idiot-proof, I'm a bigger idiot. And I can make it fail. All right, so we got a 6mm hex here. Allen key. And we'll just get them started. I wouldn't use an impact to start them, but I'm going slow and I don't care about this engine, so let's see. Oh, first problem. This bracket is hitting a ground bolt that is in the side of the block right here. Like I said, idiot proof. Find a bigger idiot. All right, let's try again. See if we clear this time. Yes. Looks like we're good. Alrighty. Pretty painless. Go slap on the other side. Alright, passenger side went on no problem. I have the bolts here that come with the adapters for the mounts, but I'm not going to put my mounts on yet because I don't know where they're going to end up on this plate once the transmission is lined up. So I think we are ready to fly this in. I think I'm going to take the coil packs off just so they're off the engine and I don't have to worry about them being in the way. Otherwise, let's get this thing in there. Alrighty. Here we go. I'm going to try to roll this in. Now, this may not clear the control arms. I might have to raise the car up a little bit, but let's just see where we're at here. It'll be a lot easier with no oil pan on the engine, that's for sure. Get this out of the way. Let's go straight. And can come down some. Past the tunnel. All right, come down some more. I just want it high enough to get over the transmission crossmember, if I can. Are we clearing? Nope, we're hitting the A-arms. Let me get, that's always a sin with this this hoist. Let me see. Maybe if I move it over a little bit, it will clear. Let's see. Not quite. Let me put the lift arms under it, raise the car a little bit. All right, I've got the car up a little bit. What I'm going to do is, the great thing about working with an engine that I don't care about, I'm just going to jam a piece of wood under the crankshaft there. I'm going to push this back. I think I'm over, I can't tell if I'm over the transmission crossmember or not. I got to get the mount over it. I think I am because we're that far back. And what I'll do is I'm going to just set this engine down right on the wood for the moment. I have no idea. Whoa! Let's not have it fall over completely. Let's get some better wood. Let's see. Try this. Let's see what that does. All I want to do is get the engine just set here, and then we'll go underneath, get the transmission bolted to the crossmember where it's supposed to be, and then we'll raise the engine, you know, back up off that wood and see where it lands. So let's get, I'm going to roll the car forward, we'll get it in the air and see where we are. All right, we are not there yet. I put the car in the air. The transmission is not even back as far as it needs to be at. It's actually sitting on the edge of the crossmember, which is unfortunate because I saw this gap and I was like, that's perfect. But that's not where it's going to be. To the point where I'm going to take this bolt off the back, get the seat belt off the engine so I have the most amount of room, and we'll get it back some more. I have a feeling this is not going to fit very well with the transmission in the factory location. All right, I'm going to jack up this transmission. And can I push this back myself, or am I going to need the hoist? All right, now am I over the crossmember? Can I see? I think it has. I still don't know if I'm in place yet. All right, now, whoops. Put the car in the air and see what it looks like. All right, I am still not far enough back. The transmission mount is sitting on the crossmember, but we're still not lined up. And you can see the the gap, the cylinder head to that stud. That's not good. Now, I don't know if that stud is there on a non-AC car, because that's off the HVAC box. This is not going to work with air conditioning in the factory location, that is for sure. Let's reset, because I want to make sure that this information is right. I don't want to throw any variables in anything. So I have the subframe is, I'll say, slightly off level. It's really close, but I put the engine slightly off level, same way. We're talking half a degree. I've got it centered in the subframe the best that I can tell. This still needs to go back, what, half inch? I mean, that's like what I have there. So I can see why people would say this is not going to work with the factory transmission dipstick. I haven't even tried to put it in yet. So I'm going to slide this back and try to get the transmission lined up with the crossmember and see where we are. This is like having a big block as far as how far that cylinder head is sitting back. All right, so I gave the engine another push, and now I'm lined up. I have as far forward as I can go with the transmission crossmember. Like I said, the engine is centered best I could get it and at the right level, and it is We're talking 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch off the firewall, and that stud for the air conditioning is right there. And unfortunately, I don't have a non-AC firewall that I can easily check to see if that stud is there on a non-AC system. I just don't remember, but that's not good. I mean, it might just clear the HVAC box, but there's no way you're getting a stock dipstick tube up there. I guess that was accurate, what people said about that. I have one I can go grab and try to fit it through there. But if it fits, it's going to be super tight. I don't think it's going to make it. All right, well, more proof. I don't like this, and I don't think this is the way you would want to go. I have the transmission bolted up all the way forward. See the witness marks? The transmission was originally further back, and that is double verified by the drive shaft. You can see the witness mark on where this thing was riding. And right now the engine, the rear axle is drooped down because we're on the lift. The axle's actually going to move rearward once there's weight on it because the shackle's in the back. So this is going to move out even more. That's too much exposed for me out of that drive shaft. This should be riding just like it is there, 1.5 inches maybe out of the shaft. More than that, you're not going to be engaged in the bushing and the tail shaft. And even if you are, with the weight of the yoke, the further away from the transmission you move, the more it's going to want to whip and wear out that bushing. That should be much, much closer. This is not the way to go, in my opinion. All right, so just to recap where we are here. The engine is centered in the car. The engine is back enough to just get into the transmission crossmember, so that barely puts the Turbo 350 in the stock location, but it's really too far forward. And I have the engine at 3 degrees down right now with the subframe level. So this is exactly what you would want when placing the engine in the car, except for that. That's no good. So I did a few checks online, and sure enough, people have run into this same situation. So people with deleting their heaters, running the flexible dipstick, it's not the right way. So this will not work. At least in my opinion, this is not the way I would ever want to go. I'm not going to delete my heater, and I'm not going to mess around with lengthening a drive shaft to have it in this bad position. So, like I said, in my opinion anyway, this is not the way to go, and this is not going to work with the stock Turbo 350 crossmember. All right, so this is not going to work. In my opinion, unless you want to lose your heater and have clearances just all wrong, this is not the way to go. I would not attempt to use the factory transmission crossmember in the factory location. This engine needs to move forward 1 inch or 1.5 inches. And that's fine. I'll show you how to make a low buck crossmember and set this up the right way so everything works. And we will be obviously fitting headers in here, basically on the driver's side, most important, and see where the engine needs to be to get the header to fit correctly. Hopefully, whoever designed these headers didn't do it with the engine sitting like this, because that's just not going to make it. I'm not doing that. So I have to get a different style crossmember, and I'll show you what I'll find. A factory crossmember. I got to look in my pile, and I'll show you how to make a cheap crossmember, because I just looked online and they sell LS swap crossmembers for like $400 and more dollars. Wow, that's ridiculous. I'll show you how to make one for, if you can't do it for less than $50, you're not trying, because it can be done. So I'm going to end this one here so I can get it prepped for the next video, and we'll see what's next. But this ain't it. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you for following along, and thank you so much for subscribing. Lots more to come. See ya.